Hello, welcome to Fuqua LinkedIn Live. I'm Jeannette Song, a professor in operations management at Fuqua. Today, I have a pleasure to share some of my research on strategic sustainability in supply chains. Now I'll share so I will present my material in the first 20 minutes and leaving the last 10 minutes for questions and answers. So when you have any questions, please type it in the comment section on LinkedIn, and I will see that on the screen and answer them in the last 10 minutes. So as we all know, for every product we consume, whether clothes or computers or cars, lies behind a complex supply chain, ranging from material suppliers to component manufacturers to distributors, assemblers, distributors, and the retailer. And classical supply chain research focuses on that given the cost and lead time of a component and the supply, how to best coordinate the production and distribution and inventory to fulfill the market demand efficiently. So by optimizing these processes that we minimize the resources used, so fulfilling the demand, the social needs for the products responsibly. And so this means on the one way, first of all, supply chain runs the world, and then by optimizing processes, the supply chain also saves the world. But this focusing on downstream management while assuming the upstream supply is given in stably is not sufficient. So as we can see, market competition drives greater product variety and affordability, so that resulting overproduction and consumption risk overexploited resources and intensified the social inequality at the source. And this posed an existential threat to the entire supply chain. And luckily, advanced technologies like 3D printing and robotics or drones and Internet of Things and blockchain enable demand-driven supply chain that further enhances supply chain efficiency. And at the same time, there are numerous internationally recognized sustainability guidelines standard that foster the socially and the environmental responsibility. But these guidelines, the implementation of these guidelines faces a lot of challenges due to the complexity of the supply chain. So when we talk about in this talk of sustainability, we focus on we cover both the social and the environmental dimensions. As a supply chain, say a buyer, say Apple or GM, and so each buyer that would face a very complex network of suppliers, extended supply chains, not only tier 1, but the tier 2, and oftentimes the violation of compliance, it happens at the tier 3, at a sub-tier, which is far away from buyer. And due to they are located in countries where social and environmental regulations are loose, and then lack of the responsibility management expertise, and they also feel less pressure from the general public. And indeed, empirical studies show that the violations are more frequent and more severe happening in up-tier supply chains. So my research studies on this, how to managing this, how to managing these challenges more effectively. And first, these two papers, we focus on the scalability of efforts of managing that. Just because this is a very very long and complex supply chain, it would be more effective and feasible to manage the buyer, just manage the next tier supplier, tier one, and then tier one suppliers manage tier two suppliers, tier two suppliers manage tier three suppliers. And because, so we wanted to say under what condition and what can the buyer do to make this effectively. Another research is about the time dimension, acknowledging that the compliance and sustainable development takes time and requires a time commitment. You invest today and you don't see the results in the future until the future. So how to design a mechanism so incentivize all the supplier partners work together to achieve a long-term impact. So I'm going to talk about the first paper in a little more detail than the other papers much faster, just give the background and the findings. So the first paper explores a multi-tier supply chain, and we wanted to, so our main finding is that the buyer can use supplier selection to influence the optimal responsible management in this multi-tier supply chain. So the motivating example of this is an event on August 2nd, 2014, a explosion at a Zhongrong, a factory of Zhongrong metal products in Kunshan, China, killed 68 workers and injured 187. And then this blast was caused by the buildup of combustible metal dust. So, and then the workers complained about this buildup and then the poor ventilations for years, but Zhongrong ignored that. And it turns out that Zhongrong is a supplier of the General Motors, but not a direct supplier. And in between, Zhongrong provide a component to the Castle, and the Castle is a tier one supplier for GM. And GM did not actually know about Zhongrong, no direct dealing. So this highlights a common strategy in supply chain where 93% of the buyers actually use this kind of approach we call delegation. In other words, the buyer delegate the sub-tier supplier management, including sustainability management, to tier one. Okay, and this one, of course, it's much more simple, and then it's also cheaper. But the drawback is that the tier one does not really feel the buyer's cost of responsibility violation and potentially underinvest in the responsibility management. Another extreme is that the control, that tier zero buyer directly manage the responsibility of tier two suppliers. This would avoid the moral hazard phenomena mentioned before. But you can see this is much more costly and complex. And in a very complex supply chain with multi-tier suppliers, it may not be feasible. So our study just investigate what is the best the buyer's optimal strategies, whether control or delegation or something in between. and what makes delegation more attractive, and how external stakeholders can facilitate greater responsible effort. So this we build up a game theoretic model with a three-tier supply chains. So the structure is just as the example above. And then the tier 1 and tier 0 are perfect responsible, and the responsible violation only occurs at the tier 2. And tier 2, of course, exert efforts to manage responsibility, and the tier 1 and tier 0 can also offer complementary efforts. So, for example, they can perform audits, they can train tier 2 suppliers, they can provide tier 2 subsidies or equipment, like a better ventilation, and so on. And tier 2's efforts is complementary to these. For tier 0, tier 1's effort, they are substitutable. Either one can do it with the same effect, but the marginal cost of exerting these efforts are different. So depending on who is more efficient. So then the violation probability at tier 2 is a function of the total efforts of the supply chain. And effort is costly, and then also violation is costly. First of all, there's a direct loss. When violation is reviewed publicly, consumers can have boycott part of the products. So you have a demand loss. So tier 0 suffers direct loss. That's proportional to the demand size and the production quantity. And then there's in each tier, there's also indirect loss, which we call the cost of violation, which include the recovery of the consumer confidence and recovery of facilities and compensation for victims, or the regulations from the local governments. So our findings shows that the buyer's optimal strategy is dependent on the key factor called the loss-adjusted effort cost, which is the marginal effort cost divided by the total loss, direct cost and indirect cost. So this measures is the effort per unit loss during the violation. And we show that when the detection probability is high, and the buyer is far more efficient than tier 1 in terms of this cost. So then the optimal strategy is to control. And otherwise, when the buyer is not far more efficient than tier 1, then delegation is optimal. When the detection probability is low, then neither tier 1 and tier 0 makes effort. So other findings just saying, so what makes delegation more attractive? So due to that optimal strategy, you can see that so delegation is more attractable if the buyer select a better tier 1 suppliers. So the tier 1 suppliers, they have lower effort costs, which means they have established the processes in place, and then and they have less. They have a higher penalty for violation, so which means they located in the in places where in the regions where significant regulation, and then where they charge a higher wholesale price, demanding a higher margin. And and we also show that in multi-tier supply chain for indirect suppliers, the consumer pressure and pressure from tier 1, it may be less effective. Subsequently, we studied the guided delegation on multi-tier responsible sourcing. guided delegation means the brand owner provide detailed guidance to their first-tier suppliers. They delegate, but also give additional guidance regarding product safety and the wages and hours and so on. And then they typically provide pre-approved component suppliers. And that this will be it's revised, give guidance, so intended to reduce the risk and also reduce the violation costs, so therefore improve the buyer's profit. So our question is whether this is effective. An incident here shows that it's not always effective. This situation is that Mattel in 2007 recorded 1.5 million children's toys, and then because of the use of pigment that contains lead, which threatens children's health, and that generated widespread publicity, and eventually cost Mattel about $110 million. And what causes this Mattel uses long-term partner leader as a contract manufacturer, and provided this tier one supplier a list of authorized paint suppliers. But Leader used the Dongxing, which is a close business partner of Leader, which is outside this list. So in this event, then Dongxing was short of yellow paint, and then they find a pigment supplier online, and which contained the pigment contains lead. So this means it's not effective. So our findings saying not only you provide a guided delegation, you must be combined with the compliance auditing and stochastically over time and directly. And you cannot delegate this auditing responsibility to tier one. The third paper is talking about we look at the time dimension, right? So we wanted to say we explore whether there is a dynamic, there is a incentive mechanism that facilitate the collaboration of the retailer and the suppliers to have long-lasting impact of sustainable development. And our findings that you need to have a measurable index, and you have a reasonable index target, and then you also need to dynamically pay the suppliers. The motivation was a Starbucks cafe program. Starbucks in the last 2 or 3 decades has experienced exponential growth. This is the number of stores, and then this is their revenue. And then the supply chain, the coffee supply chain looks like these 4 major stages. As you go from the source to the end, each stage has more technology and reaping up more profit margin. And then, however, these sources cannot be located otherwise, because this is just only these regions are appropriate for growing the coffee, but they are located in the economic underdeveloped regions. So the farmers just get a very little tiny share of the whole profit of the supply chain, while the consumption happens mostly in the developed regions. So so then realizing this, and Starbucks collaborated with a third party to develop a cafe practice, and they so it's not a one-time certification, but it's over time they evaluate them, and so this is a scorecard. They look at the supplier, and then you have so these are dimensions about the labor, dimensions about the environmental, and then they score them regularly. And then the social. So if the scores are above 60, then the supplier becomes a priority. So it's a preferred supplier. And then if it's more than 80, and then you get a premium. And if you have shown a continuous improvement, and you get a further premium. And then at the same time, Starbucks also invested heavily in supplier development. So our question is: this seems a very successful sustainability program, and then why? Whether other companies should learn, other supply chains could learn from this. So what are the essential elements for these sustainable programs? What are the key factors for the success? And what are the roles of the stakeholders? Our findings is that the essential elements of the sustainability program, you do need to have a third-party verifiable sustainable index. And then for each period, you need to define the economic accountable targets. It's not one step you can achieve the final goal. You do things gradually. You acknowledge the compliance conditions. Then the payment structure should be look at not only the performance, but also under what kind of compliance condition to achieve certain performance, and what are the worst case scenarios, and then what are the implications of future supply chain performance. So this theoretical investigations is a payment structure which departs from what I presented, the static three-tier payment structure used earlier in CAFE models. And then we actually look at their 2022 statement showing that now they are using something like this dynamic, not one size fits all kind of a payment structure. And then we also show that the factors influencing the success, including the contract length and investment success probability, and whether the investment is enduring, such as teaching the farmers, suppliers, know-how and best practice sharing. And when these conditions are lacking, and we just so then that's where the non-profit organizations is vital. So in this presentation, I just shared with you about some of my research with the co-authors on strategic sustainability in multi-year supply chains. The first two papers focusing on the space dimension about the scalability of the effort. And we show that tier by tier supply delegation for the tier by tier delegation to be effective, we need to focus on better tier one supplier selections. And data delegation must be paired with auditing. And then finally, we look at the dynamic and the long-term development on the time dimension, and we advocate development of sustainability index and dynamic payment and reward systems. So I use a little more than 20 minutes. And then is there any questions? So can you explain better how Starbucks qualifies those sustainability scores? So they partner so Starbucks partner with a third party agency. They go to the field and go to the processors, and they actually take measures of that scorecards. So they So this is how they support it. Okay, so this is from Ashley. You may know, how can companies balance economic performance with environmental and social sustainability in supply chains, and what are the most effective strategies to ensure long-term resilience and profitability? Yeah, so in terms of this long-term effectiveness, so this is relevant to the research that I presented in the third paper. So it's you need to acknowledge. So at the beginning, Starbucks just say, "Oh, you look at just the performance based. You score this much, I pay you this. You score that, I give you that." But our research shows that you also need to acknowledge how much effort the suppliers achieves to that 60 points or 80 points, and then you need to pay them accordingly, not just the final results, but the efforts. And then also you may need to reward them maybe the 50 points, maybe something 40 points you can start to reward them, to help them to develop and to incentivize them. And then the economic efficiency is meaning also, it's just not at the first time you will achieve everything. You need to develop certain goals gradually achieving it. So don't exhausting all the resources at one time. So here's from William. Okay, so given the sustainability ESG advisors, so given the evolving regulatory landscape and the consumer expectations, how do you prioritize the strategic sustainability initiative within the supply chain to ensure long-term viability and compliance? Would you share examples of successful integration of circular economic principles in supply chain strategies? So the how to prioritize is so as I mentioned, one thing is you can prioritize selection of a tier one, your immediate, and work with them and develop them, and then help them to develop so the upper tier supply chains. And so the successful integration of circular economy principles is so you can see industry-wise maybe manufacturer responsibility initiatives, and overall I think it's the industry initiative is a partnership and a collaboration. That's what I see how it's effective. So I have this question about, are certain sustainability factors weighed more than others? I think the labor factors is more important because so if you have a choice, so first you have to guarantee the labor safety, and then and they are being taken care of, and then teach them how to do better practice. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. And next month please join Professor John Felt on Wednesday, December 4th at 12:30 p.m. for a talk on ethical entrepreneurship. Thank you.